I grew up feeling like a shadow in my own home, always hovering behind the spotlight my sister seemed born to claim. Mom's eyes lit up for her in ways they never did for me, and even when I spoke, my words felt like whispers lost in a crowded room. Birthdays, school achievements, simple compliments, they were always hers, and mine barely noticed. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, proudly showing Mom a drawing I had spent hours perfecting, only to watch her smile fade the moment. My sister walked in with some trivial story about a new dress or a party invitation. That was our world. Hers always mattered. Mine barely existed. Even small disagreements became lessons in invisibility. When I voiced a preference for friends or hobbies, it was met with an eye roll or a sigh, as if my choices were inherently inferior. And then there was him. My first love. Someone who should have been mine to cherish and confide in. But my mother, ever the puppeteer, subtly nudged him toward my sister, offering praise for her wit, her charm, her smile, while casting me as the quiet, overlooked girl. I remember the sting of hearing her laugh at one of my jokes and see her hand brush over his shoulder as if claiming him by default. Those moments, seemingly small to anyone else, were the threads weaving a tapestry of neglect that would define my early years. Every compliment my sister received, every attention she commanded, became another reminder that I was always second, always shadowed, always expected to fade. And yet, in those dark corners, I learned to watch, to wait, to understand the subtle currents of favoritism that shaped our lives. A silent resilience forming beneath the weight of betrayal, preparing me for the day when the balance would shift. The day my sister got engaged to him is burned into my memory like a photograph I wish I could tear apart. I remember walking into their carefully decorated living room, balloons and banners announcing her happiness, in colors that felt too bright, too mocking. He was there, smiling, holding her hand the way he used to hold mine, and my chest tightened so violently I thought I might collapse. Mom's eyes sparkled with pride, a glow I had never earned, a glow reserved for her golden child. Friends and family surrounded them, raising glasses and toasting their love, their laughter echoing in a way that made me feel invisible, small, foolish. I remember forcing a smile, nodding at the words of congratulations, pretending to share in their joy, even as my heart fractured. My mind raced with every, how could this happen, and why am I the one left behind? But beneath the devastation, a quiet voice emerged, firm and resolute. I swore in that moment that their choices, their favoritism, their cruel indifference would not define my life. I would not crumble under humiliation. I would rise in ways they couldn't anticipate. That party, which should have been joyous, became a crucible, testing my strength, forging the determination that would one day shift the balance of power. Every smile from my sister, every glance from him, became fuel. I left that room carrying heartbreak like a weight, but also a seed of purpose, a promise to myself that I would never again be sidelined or dismissed, and that one day they would see the cost of their betrayal. I left town the day after the engagement, suitcase in hand, heart heavy, but resolute. The streets felt unfamiliar, the apartment I rented sparse and quiet. Yet for the first time, it was mine. Nights were long and lonely, filled with the echo of laughter I wasn't a part of. But in that silence, I began to hear myself. I enrolled in courses, took jobs that challenged me, and celebrated small victories. A promotion, a compliment from a mentor, a project completed flawlessly. Each success, no matter how minor, chipped away at the self-doubt my family had instilled. I learned to dress for myself, to walk with confidence, to speak with authority, and slowly, the girl who once faded into the background began to emerge. Even in solitude, I discovered strength in routine and pride in achievement. I allowed myself brief moments of nostalgia, of sadness for what I had lost, but they never lingered too long. Beneath the loneliness, a quiet fire grew, a sense that one day the world, and my family, would have to acknowledge my presence. Every email I sent, every client impressed, every door I opened alone felt like laying bricks for the life I deserved. In the shadows of isolation, I was learning to wield power without arrogance and confidence without cruelty, preparing for the moment when I would reclaim my narrative. Years passed, and with them came a life I had only dreamed of in the quiet hours of my lonely apartment. I had a career that demanded respect, friends who valued my intellect and humor, mentors who encouraged my ambition, and colleagues who sought my insight. Every achievement felt like a quiet triumph over the girl I had once been. The girl who sat in the shadows, overlooked, dismissed, and heartbroken. I looked in the mirror each morning and no longer saw the timid, fading version of myself. I saw strength, poise, and an unwavering confidence earned through hard work and self-respect. And yet, amid the success and recognition, memories of injustices lingered. Mom praising my sister for accomplishments I had achieved first, subtle comments meant to belittle me, moments where my feelings were ignored as if they didn't matter. Those memories, once painful, had transformed into fuel, reminding me of what I had endured and what I had overcome. Every handshake, every nod of approval, every invitation to lead or speak carried a quiet sense of vindication. I had become the person my younger self had always wanted to be, noticed, respected, and most importantly, untouchable by the cruel favoritism that had once defined my world. Confidence now radiated in every room I entered, and for the first time, I understood the quiet satisfaction of reclaiming one's life. The envelope arrived on a crisp morning, its elegant script immediately sending a shiver through me. My sister was hosting a party, another display of her life, her status, her curated perfection. Photos of her new apartment, her designer outfits, and her social circle had already been circulating online, flaunting the wealth and attention I had once been denied. Opening the invitation, I felt that familiar tug of FOMO, the fear of being left out, of letting her control the narrative once again. Should I attend? Part of me wanted to retreat, to preserve the peace I had painstakingly built, but another fiercer part whispered that this was my chance to be seen, to reclaim the space I had been denied for so long. Every detail on that card, glossy, paper, the careful choice of colors, her signature flourish, felt like a challenge, a taunt wrapped in civility. I imagined the murmurs when I appeared, the subtle gasps, the double takes, and the rising tension that my presence could create. After hours of pacing, weighing pride against opportunity, doubt against ambition, I made my decision. I would go, but on my terms, a quiet but undeniable force stepping into the world that had once ignored me. I stepped out of the car and felt a thrill I hadn't expected, the evening air carrying a sense of anticipation that matched the rhythm of my heart. My dress clung perfectly, tailored to accentuate the poise I had spent years cultivating, and every step toward the door felt deliberate, calculated, powerful. As I entered the room, the chatter quieted almost imperceptibly, and then I saw them. My sister frozen mid-laugh, her eyes widening in disbelief, and him, my past love, blinking as if trying to process what he was seeing. Their mouths opened and closed like fish gasping for air, and I caught snippets of whispers. Is that really her? She looks different. I smiled inwardly, feeling the quiet satisfaction of being noticed on my own terms. I could hear my own thoughts, the steady mantra I had repeated for years. I am no longer invisible. Every glance, every subtle intake of breath from them fueled a deep, unspoken power. My sister's laughter faltered, replaced by forced composure, and I sensed the tension in the room shift. He met my eyes for a moment, a flash of guilt or surprise. I couldn't tell, but it was enough. This was my stage, my moment to exist, fully, unapologetically, and to let them realize that the girl they had ignored had grown into someone they couldn't dismiss. The murmurs began almost immediately, soft at first, like leaves rustling in a gentle wind, and then spreading, impossible to ignore. Guests who had barely glanced at me in the past now stole glances, whispered behind their hands, and shifted in their seats as if trying to process my presence. My mother's posture stiffened. Her smile wavered, and I could feel the subtle tension radiating off her. She tried to greet me warmly, but the words stumbled out in clipped phrases, betraying the guilt she couldn't hide. "You look amazing," she said, her voice too high, too strained, and I offered a polite nod, letting the acknowledgement land like a stone in water, rippling with quiet power. My sister, ever composed, attempted to regain control, leaning closer to her friends, her laughter slightly forced, her eyes flicking toward me every few seconds. Conversations shifted when I approached, polite questions laced with curiosity, admiration, and a hint of disbelief. I caught snippets. "She's thriving." I hadn't expected this. She seemed so confident now. Every reaction fed the careful satisfaction coursing through me. For years I had been overlooked, dismissed, and invisible, and now the room acknowledged my transformation. Their shock mingled with envy and awkward awe was intoxicating, a reminder that power could exist quietly, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. The soft hum of conversation faltered when the door opened again, and I felt a surge of anticipation coil in my chest. He walked in beside me, my husband, tall, composed, and impossibly confident, with that effortless charm that drew people in without demanding it. Gasps punctuated the room as heads turned, and I caught my sister's hand freeze mid-gesture, her face paling ever so slightly. He smiled at a few acquaintances, polite but commanding, and then, without breaking stride, his gaze met my ex-boyfriend's. I saw it in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, followed by hesitation, then shock. "Wait, who?" he started, and my sister quickly covered, forcing a laugh that fell flat. I could feel the tension thicken around them, their carefully constructed world shifting in subtle but undeniable ways. I whispered to my husband, "Just act natural," though my lips curled with a private satisfaction. The crowd seemed to sense the shift too, the room quietly buzzing as if electricity had been switched on. Every eye was now partly on us, partly on them, and I savored the unspoken acknowledgement. For once, I was the center of attention, and they had no idea what was coming next. This was the calm before the storm, a perfect moment of poised suspense, where power had begun to tilt, and the game they thought they controlled was quietly slipping from their hands. Later, away from the hum of the party, I found myself in the quiet of the hallway with my mother and sister, the weight of years pressing between us. I could see the tension etched on their faces, the subtle quiver in my mother's lips, the defensive stiffness of my sister's shoulders. I drew in a steady breath and let the words flow, raw and deliberate. "Do you realize what it felt like to be invisible in my own family?" I asked, my voice calm but edged with the hurt I had carried for years. I recounted the countless times my achievements were dismissed, my opinions ignored, and the way my mother had guided him toward my sister, as if I were never meant to matter. Their expressions shifted, my mother's guilt almost tangible, my sister's disbelief mingled with unease. I allowed myself a moment to reflect internally, remembering the nights of loneliness, the sting of humiliation, the silent promises I made to myself. "I've spent years building a life, earning respect and finding strength," I continued, letting each word land carefully. "And yet, you acted like I didn't exist, like my happiness was irrelevant." I felt the tension ripple between us, the quiet power in finally voicing the hurt that had been ignored for so long. Their silence was deafening, and I realized that this confrontation wasn't about anger. It was about reclaiming my story, asserting my worth, and letting them see that I had grown beyond the shadow they cast. The moment had come. I stepped forward, my husband by my side, and with a calm smile I addressed the room. "I'd like to introduce someone very special," I said, letting my voice carry just enough to draw attention without shouting. Heads turned, curious murmurs spreading like wildfire. He extended a hand with effortless charm and casually mentioned the company he co-owned. an enterprise I knew had been a rival to some of the family's business interests for years. The room went still, the hum of polite conversation faltering as eyes widened. I watched my sister freeze completely, her hand clutching her glass as though it might anchor her to reality. My ex-boyfriend's jaw slackened, the disbelief evident in the sharp intake of his breath. You two are together?" someone whispered, disbelief mixing with awe. My husband nodded, his presence commanding the attention he didn't need to demand. And I felt a thrill at the subtle reversal taking place. I didn't need to embellish, didn't need to explain the depth of our success, or the irony of our alliance. Just letting him be there, fully present and accomplished, said enough. I noticed my mother shift uncomfortably, her eyes darting between us. The pride she had once reserved for my sister now mingled with an unmistakable unease. People began exchanging glances, whispers growing louder, the social tide turning in a way that left them exposed without me lifting a finger. My sister attempted to regain composure, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to herself, but the damage was done. She and my ex-boyfriend were now publicly humbled, their confident facade cracking under the weight of undeniable proof that I had not only survived their favoritism and manipulation, but thrived beyond their expectations. The room buzzed with shock and admiration, and I felt a quiet, intoxicating satisfaction. For years, I had been sidelined, dismissed, and overlooked. But now, without raising my voice or seeking revenge through cruelty, the balance had shifted completely. They were forced to reckon with the consequences of their actions, and I could simply stand there, elegant, confident, and utterly untouchable, letting the truth of my transformation speak for itself. Every glance in my direction carried acknowledgement of the power I had reclaimed, the respect I had earned, and the quiet, crushing justice I had delivered simply by living the life I had built, unbound by their interference or approval. The room gradually returned to its usual hum, but I moved through it differently now. Each step lighter, each smile more genuine. Guests approached me, offering congratulations, compliments, and warm handshakes, oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling behind my calm exterior. I listened politely, nodded graciously, and allowed myself brief moments of quiet satisfaction, savoring the subtle shift in energy that had taken place. My sister lingered nearby, her usual arrogance muted, and even my mother's attempts at casual conversation felt strained and tentative. I caught myself reflecting on how far I had come, from the invisible girl overshadowed at every turn, to a woman fully recognized and respected in her own right. The satisfaction wasn't in their discomfort. It was in the knowledge that life had finally balanced itself in a way that felt fair, poetic, and deserved. As I smiled at a group of acquaintances discussing work and family triumphs, I realized the quiet joy of empowerment, the relief of finally being seen, and the sweetness of karma settling in naturally. For the first time, I could breathe fully, free from resentment, proud of the strength I had cultivated and the life I had built on my own terms. In the quiet that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything: the favoritism, the betrayals, the years of feeling invisible in a family that should have been my safe place. I realized that their choices, while painful, had shaped me in ways I could never have anticipated, forging resilience, determination, and a deep sense of self-worth. My mother's eyes still carried regret, her smiles tinged with guilt, and my sister moved with a humility she had rarely shown before. But I no longer needed validation from them. Their recognition, while satisfying, was not the source of my strength. I had learned that self-respect is earned from within, that betrayal can teach lessons more powerful than affection ever could, and that moving forward requires embracing one's own achievements without bitterness. There was a bitter sweetness in seeing them humbled, a quiet acknowledgement that life had its own way of balancing the scales. But the true victory was mine. The ability to live freely, with dignity, and without letting past injustices define who I had become. As the night wound down and the last guest trickled away, I found myself alone for a moment, letting the events of the evening settle around me. The satisfaction of justice, quiet yet undeniable, filled me, not with arrogance but with a deep sense of peace. I reflected on the years it had taken to reach this point. The heartbreak, the loneliness, the silent vows to never let anyone define my worth. Each challenge had shaped me, honed my resilience, and taught me that true power often lies in patience, preparation, and the ability to thrive without needing to prove anything loudly. I thought of my mother, still grappling with regret, and my sister, humbled in ways that words could not fully capture, and I felt compassion alongside my quiet triumph. Life had shifted, the scales balanced, but the story was far from over. There were lessons yet to unfold, conversations yet to be had, and subtle ripples that would continue to shape our relationships. For now, though, I allowed myself to revel in the strength I had earned, the calm authority of someone who had faced betrayal, endured and emerged victorious, not through cruelty, but through resilience, dignity, and the quiet force of living a life unapologetically my own. Just as I thought the night had ended and the tension had dissolved, a message buzzed on my phone. My sister, curt and carefully measured, asking to meet to talk things over. I smiled faintly, knowing the bravado behind her words masked both curiosity and a hint of desperation. My mother had also lingered, lingering in the doorway with an uneasy expression that betrayed a mind racing for redemption, or perhaps another attempt to regain control. I allowed myself a brief flashback to all the times I had been underestimated, dismissed, and pushed aside, and the memory fueled a calm certainty within me. I had grown too strong, too confident, and too prepared to be caught off guard again. The lessons of the past had forged me into someone untouchable by their old tactics. Still, the flicker of possibility, the idea that they might try once more, sent a delicious thrill through me. I knew whatever came next, I would face it with the same poise, strategy, and quiet dominance that had brought me this far. Life was mine, fully claimed, and they could only watch as I continued to rise, unshaken, unstoppable, and ready for whatever twists lay ahead.